Hello, beautiful vegans. I'm Marikita Solis, and I'm excited today because we're going to be filled with a light of hope here today. I'm so excited to welcome Angel Flynn and Light to this show, and I'm excited to welcome everybody that's watching. Please let us know who you are and give StreamYard permission to use your name. And if you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear them. This is going to be a really profoundly hour full of profound wisdom. So I'm very excited. So welcome, Light and Angel. Now, this is y'all are coming from Hawaii, so this is a beautiful broadcast. And I'm pretending I'm in Hawaii also. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely, it's a treat to be able to speak about veganism while I'm sitting on my backside.
Well, that's wonderful. We want to hear. And tell us about y'all's journey, about Gentle World, about how both of you all became vegans. Because I'd love to hear more.
I guess I'll start with my story. It goes back a long way. When my wife and I first met, when we were engaged, and it was about 1969, which when I say it sounds like 1869, now it's so far back. We decided what we wanted to do with our lives when we got married, got together, would be to not only search for the truth, but to live it when we found it. That was a little different. Searching is one thing, finding is another, and doing it. So two incidents happened. One, we were out in Nebraska or Iowa, somewhere there, looking to rent a place to live. And my wife at the time went in to discuss the particulars with the owners. And I sat outside, and they had this big bull, huge bull. And I just sat there. I was in a chair. I sat there, and he was behind a little fence, but he was no more than 10 feet away from me. And I'm watching him, and I see a tear, what appeared to be, it was a tear. It was liquid coming out of his eyes, which to me is a tear. And I'm sitting there wondering, what has he got to be crying about? He's sitting out here, and he's standing out here in this beautiful land, and nobody's bothering him. Shortly after that, I'd say about 2 weeks after, my wife and I went to a movie. There were movies then about the different insanities in the world. I think it was called Mondo Cane, A Dog's World. And in there were four men, big men in fisherman boots. I think they're called waders, where they come up to here. And they were hitting a bull over the head with sledgehammers. And the poor creature was screaming and screaming. And it took 10 blows to send him to his knees and to kill him. And we came out of that theater and we said, well, that's the truth. Is that how they get meat? Well, we can't eat meat anymore. And that was the end of eating meat. We didn't even think about it. There was no precedent for veganism. I never heard of anybody. I had read about a few vegetarians, but I'd never heard of anybody not eating dairy and not wearing silk and all that stuff. And that came slowly. We started out as vegetarian, like most people. And then we went to visit a dairy. And they want you to visit where they want you to visit, like most institutions. We decided to go behind the scenes, and we discovered the reality of how those animals, dairy animals, including the calf, which left the mother bellowing. To stand there and listen. Oh, you get used to it. Thank you very much. We don't want to get used to it. We want to stop it. And we left. Of course, we didn't rent that house. And that was the beginning. From then on, we started cutting out animal products, including feathers. We found out what pillows that had feathers in them and mattresses and all that. And we actually took pillows that we had that had feathers, and we climbed a mountain. I believe this was in Colorado, and we slit them open, and we shook them out. And these feathers, we gave the birds, what animals they took them from, ducks or whatever, gave them a final flight. It was a beautiful thing to see those feathers floating, hundreds of feet to the ground. that was our beginning with what we didn't even know there was a word veganism. We actually, believe it or not out of egotism, but because we had never heard of it before, we thought we invented not eating or dealing with anything animal. We didn't know anybody else who had done that. But this was 1970, which, wow, it sounds, nowadays, it sounds like a medieval time. But that's how it began. And that's where we stayed from it. And we actually formed a commune because it got to a point where we couldn't eat with anyone. I couldn't even eat. My mother was a chef, and they thought we would die. You know, they thought there's no way to get protein. She used to put a little like meat sauce in our food because she, you know, for her, it was the thought that she was saving our lives. But we had to stop eating her food, and we actually had to stop eating with anyone who sat in front of us eating parts of animals. And eventually we learned from the Dinshaws about that the word was vegan and that it had been established before us. That's about the beginning.
Wow.
For me, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just saying that was a powerful story. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
It's a powerful story. And that's how I became vegan, was really from hearing their story. Because I had learned a bit about veganism before I met Light and Sun, and I had started to go in that direction. I had, read some books and watched some documentaries and started to learn about the stuff that goes on with the production of eggs and dairy. And so I had been inspired in that direction, but it was really when I met Light and Sun and heard them speak about those early days when they were really pioneering. I mean, they didn't know that there were other people doing it. So everything that they were doing in this direction was brand new for them. And I kind of came from, for me, it was in the around the year 2000 that I met them. And so I knew other people who kind of identified as vegan, but in a sense it had become kind of diluted. A lot more people know about veganism now, but this early idealism that they had was something I wasn't seeing anywhere. So I had kind of encountered people who looked at it like it's a bit of an inconvenience. Even people who had animal rights leanings didn't take it the whole way because they were saying, oh, it's hard, it's hard to do this, it's hard to do that. And when I met Light and Sun and they were telling me, well, we didn't have health food stores. We didn't have any vegan products or even tofu or soy milk. There was no bread, there was nothing. But they did it because they believed in it so strongly that they didn't care if all they had to eat was canned peas and nuts and raisins. They did it because they were thrilled to be stepping out of that other paradigm. And so that was for me when a light really went on. And I said, oh, wait a minute, this is actually much, much bigger than anything I realized it was. And so that was really the beginning for me.
You know what it was? It was the first time that we knew an irrefutable truth. Every other truth I thought I knew, somebody could talk me out of it, because I didn't really know. I thought I knew. But this was a truth that God himself could come and say, no, it's okay, you can eat animals. I would say you're an imposter because that can't be true. It's a cruel, cruel act. And there's no purpose in it. We don't need to eat that. It's not like a lion who has, at the time, no choice. We had plenty of choices. And of course, it wasn't difficult for us. We ate a lot of peanuts and raisins, and we loved them, and we still do to this day. We would open that can in the car, and that scent of roasted peanuts would envelop the car. We were salivating already, but we didn't care. We knew we were doing something that was right. Really, first time in our lives that was right, and it was irrefutable. Nobody could talk me out of it. That's still true today.
That's a wonderful place to be in. And what did your family like when you first discovered veganism? Or well, you didn't know it was veganism, but when you first were changing the way you ate, what did your family say? Besides your mother.
They thought we had gone nuts. Well, they mainly thought that we would die. That back then they didn't know there was protein in every green vegetable. They didn't know about that. They thought you had to mix. There was a book about it where you had to mix beans and rice in order to get perfect protein, which of course That's not true today. But we knew we weren't going to be punished. How unfair would that be? We were finally doing something right. Didn't think we'd be punished, but they, being our parents, they were afraid for us. But of course, we're still here and they're not. So
did they ever shift?
They what?
Did they ever shift your family?
No, I begged my mother, who was the best chef I've ever known in those years, to be a chef for vegan. No, they didn't want to hear of it. Didn't want to hear of it.
Well,
which, by the way, today is a very different thing. You talk about people losing hope. I'm a 52-year vegan, and they got to stop thinking that way. I thought it would take 10 years when I started for the whole America to change, but that was youthful thinking. But still, I've never seen such a radical change in any truth as I'm seeing today, a large part because of this internet, where people are aware. I wasn't aware as a kid about a slaughterhouse. Nobody ever showed me that. But nowadays you can punch it up and there it is. So it's very hopeful to see. I watch TV and I remember when they used to joke and kid and put down everything about tofu and veganism. They don't do that anymore. Now when they mention it, they always have somebody in the family. I've never seen a change like this in the direction of truth. I'm very hopeful. I mean, I hate for it to take another day longer, but it's coming. It's a truth whose time has come, and there's no turning that back, especially with young people. They're not going to stand for that kind of treatment of animals much longer. I think it's a very hopeful time. Not in the world at large, evidently. They're talking about nuclear war. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's a little bit of, you must admit, a little bit of an insane asylum that they're even contemplating dropping atom bombs again. That makes a lot of sense. But on the vegan front, the change is enormous. I mean, I've gone from nobody ever heard of the word, nobody ever saw it, including us. It's any newspaper you pick up, any magazine, you got articles. It's wonderful. It's very hopeful. I just wish it would be quicker, but a change like this isn't happening, obviously, overnight.
right.
I'll
Yes.
be now.
Well, maybe not overnight, but there is a reality in history that social shifts can go at a certain pace, and then things happen that dramatically change that pace. Social change is subject to all sorts of factors that can rapidly accelerate its pace. So we sort of hold out hope also for the possibility of some event or happening or something that will create a radical shift quickly. And that's something that is completely possible.
Yeah. One time we thought it would be mad cow disease. We thought that would be the factor. If people started dying from eating meat, maybe they would change. Although not necessarily. There are people who are dying from smoking and they got a cigarette in their mouth. So it's not a guarantee, but it certainly would help.
And plenty of people dying from eating animal products. It's just
and that too.
More slowly. They die more slowly, but even that doesn't seem to be enough of a factor.
Yes, they're not making the connection. And then the government's preventing it so much. So, yeah. And I'm looking at these wonderful comments. Like, even if you could convince me that meat was good for you, I wouldn't eat it, says Aaron. That's for sure. And we need a much less default omnivore media. Amen to that.
Yeah, that the industries are so powerful. They're lobbying the governments. They have control of the media. They have tremendous power at this point. But it's not necessarily always going to be that way. And thankfully, the internet does provide this opportunity for other voices. And I think one of the big things that you were referring to is just the consciousness growing, the awareness growing. So even though the other side is still tremendously powerful and people's habits and the way they've always done things has power over people, there is this other side that is growing in power, the awareness and the consciousness about about the reality of what it does to the animals, the reality of what it's doing to the planet, and the reality of what it's doing to people's health. All of those things, I would say the awareness around that is growing. And, maybe it just has to reach a certain critical mass or, hit a kind of a tipping point, and things could change much more quickly.
They don't like to use the word like in medicine, but it's a panacea. It covers everything. There's no negative. It's better, like you said, for your health, for the planet, for the animals. It's better for everything. There's nothing that it's not better for. And it's very important that people know it's not a diet. It's a consciousness changer. It's not just, oh, I'm eating differently, like I cut out the bread. It's a very different thing. It changes. I think it actually literally changes your brain cells. But I know I used to be a guy like everybody else. If I finished eating something in a car, whoop, it went out the window. That's a big garbage can. And all of a sudden your brain cells change. Says, no, I don't want to do that. I want to put it in the trash can. And that's just an example of everything you think about is different. I wish people would know that even their problems and their depression and all the things that make them heavy, it all gets better with being a vegan and being proud of yourself for doing something. And when, pardon me, when you look at the animals, you're driving by and you look at the cows and the horses included, the people eat horses, which, by the way, we have on another piece of land we now have about 15 horses that were rescued from all over. And they're just they're just living free and eating the best herbivore grass. And it's a thrill to watch them. Yeah, people.
We were just having a conversation the other day. A couple came to visit us, someone who had visited here before and brought his partner because he wanted her to hear the gentle world perspective on veganism. So we were having this great conversation about what it really means. And they come from something of a Buddhist perspective. So they were talking about this concept, this teaching of being in relationship. And he said that term, and it just really struck me because people think of veganism as being kind of a fringe issue. Like it's for people who care about animals, that it's kind of not related to all of the other huge problems that we have that are plaguing us as a society and as humanity and as spiritual beings, and as a community of human beings. But when he said this term, right relationship, it just really struck me as being almost like the kernel of what veganism is all about, because it is about animal rights, of course, and it's about nonviolence, and it's about acting ethically. But in a sense, it's almost about the way we see ourselves and our relationship with everything else around us. We can either choose to have this idea that everything else outside of us exists to serve us, which is kind of what you're essentially saying, the philosophy you're living. If you take from other beings that which doesn't belong to you, and if you are willing to see violence inflicted on other beings for your own pleasure and your convenience and your habits and all of that, if we shift that into, wait a minute, no, I don't want to behave in this way towards my fellow beings. I want to move through the world in a way that is peaceful and gentle and as harmless as possible. That's right relationship at its core. And that, to me, is at the core of veganism, is what kind of beings do we want to be? Do we want to be predatory? Do we want other beings and the rest of the planet to have to be afraid of us as we move through the world? Or do we want to be protective? Do we want to just be, not inflict harm around us as we go through our lives? So I think that, it extends from our veganism into everything else that we do in our lives. And in fact, Will Tuttle talks about that a lot in his book, book. And he talks about this whole notion of, because we have been most of us raised in families where, not intentionally necessarily, but our parents weaned us onto foods that turn us into predators, even though that's not really who we are in our natures. We become predatory. And that you can see in not just in our food choices and in our other lifestyle things that we do, clothing and cosmetics and all of that, but also the way other nations prey upon one another, the way other races prey upon one another, the way other economies prey upon one another. So it's really about making that inner shift about what does it mean to be a human being? Are we predatory beings or are we not? It seems like everything in our being responds negatively to inflicting harm. We don't like that. We don't like to see other creatures suffering. So veganism is really about stepping back into, I think, those selves that are more peaceful and gentle.
Well, another definition of that is the word ahimsa, and also the Hippocratic Oath, which says, first, do no harm. That's pretty simple. And the Golden Rule, they're all the same thing. Do unto others as you would have them do unto others. Makes sense. But
the Hippocratic Oath should really be everybody's oath.
Right.
You don't have to be a doctor for that to be a moral imperative. Everybody should first do no harm.
That would be a world changer.
And everybody would be vegan. Same with if everybody lived up to the Golden Rule, everybody would be vegan. It would be a vegan world. So as vegans, talking about empowerment and hope, just being vegan, I mean, we don't want to say it's something you should so pat yourself on the back about. It really is just living according to a minimum standard of decency. On the other hand, when you look at the way the rest of the population is, just being vegan, we're stepping into our own power in a way, because we are reclaiming this idea that people can change. And if we can change, we know that other people can change. And B, that it's possible for human beings to actually create a new future, because we're doing it for ourselves. By becoming vegan, we're stepping into this other way of relating with the world. And it creates the hope for a future where the rest of humanity steps into that too. And we know, because we know once we are vegan, we can see the scope of that, the breadth of that. We see that that's actually possible for the rest of the world.
And we do deserve a pat on the back.
And a little pat on the back. A little pat on the back for seeing that.
Well, that's true, because I remember talking to Dr. Will Tuttle, and he said, it's a miracle anybody's vegan, because the way that we're raised, like you were talking about. That's very true. So I do think we deserve a pat on the back also. And I remember just my friend telling me the other day that when his children were little, they didn't want to eat meat. And that goes along with what you were saying, Angel, that we're teaching our children to eat this way, right? And I remember listening to Dr. Milton Mills and a presentation that he just had for us, and talking about how we're setting our children up when they come out of the schools to be ready for statins, to be ready for the stents and the heart disease and the high cholesterol, because we're feeding them that way. And so like we're teaching them. And so what are we? We're leading them to the emergency rooms, which is so sad.
My wife used to say, kids are beautiful and then they become adulterated, which is true. They just, they make them grow out of some of the beauty of youth, really.
Well, again, and now we're seeing with the internet, if you go on YouTube, I'm sure a lot of people have seen these clips of children where their parents have actually captured them having the epiphany that they're eating animals and reacting in the natural way that a child would, which is absolute horror when they figure out that what they're putting in their mouths is actually the people they read about in their little books who they've been taught to love. And those reactions and these children being captured on camera and now being made available for people to see that, it's quite a miracle, really, that one of the things that the internet allows us is to be able to witness these perceptions, and then that can help awaken that inside other people and remember that, right, of course, that is the way a child would react if basically exposed to this very basic truth that we all have had to be conditioned to accept. Part of that process of adulteration is learning to accept this horrendous truth that we're eating other beings who are like us.
Where did you see that? I would love to see that.
I can send you some
the-
clips. I downloaded a few because we wanted to share them with people who come here because they're incredibly powerful.
Very
There's
moving. The
about
little
half a
kids
dozen
are
of them.
crying. I don't want to eat. It's very moving.
Yeah,
Yeah,
those are really powerful. Thank you. Yeah, we'd love to, and I'll share them with our viewers. So, wow, tell us about Gentle World and how that started.
Well, as I began before, it started because we eventually had to separate ourselves from people who were carnivorous. And my folks had a hotel in upstate New York. And I would tell the young people who worked there what we had come to about eating animals. And some of them said, I can understand that. And they, at the time, became vegan too. And eventually, we couldn't live with other people. And we started to live together. And that became, back then, they had the word commune, which I never connected. I never connected commune with communism, for example. I always thought that it was a gathering of people who were like-minded, which is what it was. We were like-minded to the point of that's how we treated ourselves and animals. So we became a commune of, at the most, of about 35 people. And we started, I guess, prophesizing in one way about, we were in Florida at the time. And every Thanksgiving, we would have every vegan we knew in Florida for dinner, for a truly Thanksgiving dinner that didn't involve killing a turkey to give thanks. That didn't seem quite right. And at the time, there were about, I'd say maybe 75. I don't know what it is today, but I'm sure it's a lot more than 75 people in Florida that are vegan. And we would feed them. We had this huge table. And we became the food people. I mentioned my mother was a great chef. And when I started eating with other vegans back then, it was very nice, but the food was bland. I mean, they didn't believe in seasoning. They didn't believe in taste. And I said, well, I'm certainly not going to get anybody to change giving them this food instead of what they were eating. And so we became the food people. We made, and we opened a restaurant eventually on Maui, where we fed, we called it Incredibly Delicious. And over the door, you know how McDonald's says 1 billion served? We had 1 million saved over our door.
Well, before the restaurant even was Gentle World published back in 1981 a collection of vegan recipes because they started just experimenting to see if they could recreate things like lasagna and egg rolls,
things we love,
foods that they love, that just replacing one ingredient with a different ingredient. And this was before there was a huge, obviously there was no vegan food movement, so they were really, again, just pioneering the vegan cooking. And so they wanted to make that available to the public. So the recipes got put together into a cookbook. It was 1981. It was the very first full-length vegan cookbook in the United States, called the Cookbook for People Who Love Animals.
Typewritten. That's how long ago it was. Typed.
Typewriter. It still is, to this day, has never been entered onto the computer. It still sells. It's sold over 100,000 copies. It's had about 10 print runs, I believe. It's a class, it's considered a classic of the vegan movement. The people who really know it are the people from the beginning, people who go back so far that they didn't have any other vegan books to learn how to cook from.
It was, by the way, it was yellow, and it was called, we began calling it the Cookbook for People Who really underlined love animals, but they wanted the publisher
Thought that was a bit much.
That was a bit much. And we couldn't use the word vegan because nobody knew what that was. We had to say totally vegetarian. That was the
Pure
first
vegetarian.
true vegan cookbook on the market.
That's amazing.
So that went
Let's see.
nonprofit 501c3 educational.
Oh, go ahead.
So it went from, we got a little delay from the Zoom there. So it started as an intentional community, and then with the publishing of the book, it turned into a nonprofit 501c3 educational organization. So that's when it kind of became more of a formal, okay, let's actually have a public service of educating people about veganism. So it went into seminars, cooking classes, video and audio material, lectures, mail order catalog.
We did a celebrity banquet, which was very big at the time, where we had, I'd say, about 30 celebrities, some of whom the kids wouldn't recognize. They would Sidney Poitier, Drew Barrymore,
Danny Glover,
just a whole bunch of.
Sheena Easton.
We didn't charge them anything, and we went first class. Back then, it cost the commune, I'd say, about $20,000, which back then was still is a lot of money.
So keep in mind, this wasn't done as a fundraiser. It was done as an awareness-raising exercise. So they were trying
Casey
to...
Kasem, I want to add.
Casey Kasem.
River Phoenix.
Casey Kasem was the host.
And River
Phoenix. So they actually, what they were hoping to do back then, I mean, this was before... Nowadays, there's been this strange kind of phenomenon that's occurred with celebrities going vegan to lose weight or something, and then promoting it for a while and then dropping off and ending up that being even a worse problem than if they had never done it in the first place. But back then, this was, again, a brand new idea. And the concept was if somebody high profile enough tries this out and gets healthy and feels better and gets into it and recognizes what it is, then it might gain a whole other level of exposure. So the thought was that a celebrity banquet could provide this opportunity to bring delicious vegan food to influence people who are an influence to others. That was the
motive.
And the tagline, to influence those who are an influence to others. So that was the idea. And there is a little bit of video of it where it's pretty amazing because it was back in the 80s. Yeah. So vegan food wasn't known. You know, it wasn't like now where they all have their fancy cupcakes and this and that. They didn't know anything about it. And they're eating these huge plates of delicious vegan food and raving about how good it is. And
we had 21 main dishes from 21 countries. I mean, it was a major event. We had 35 celebrities. Casey Kasem, I want to add, by the way, was a beautiful man. Became a vegan from one of our members. He was a vegetarian, and our member talked him into being a vegan. He was a beautiful guy. I was sorry to see him go. And
after the banquet, there was so much food left over that they were actually able to recover their costs by selling it to people in Hollywood, like even Steven Spielberg.
We filled his freezer. They never ask how much. They have so much money, they don't care how much. So Spielberg was one, and the head of that, what is that major union of actors? Anyway, some really influential people. They just say, fill my freezer. And our food was delicious, so we didn't have to worry about that. It still is, for that matter.
But after the banquet, then people in Hollywood wanted Junta World to move to LA and open a restaurant because they wanted their food. And Junta World is a more country people than city people. And they said, oh, we can't live in LA. That's not going to be possible. But somehow or other, the idea came about that what they could do is move to Maui, Hawaii, and open a restaurant there. Because at the time, Maui was like the hotspot of kind of hip, new age, conscious, progressive kind of people. And so they thought this would be a great audience for the vegan message. So they made the move to Maui and opened a restaurant there. And sure enough, it was met with huge success, and people were lining up out the door. And
we called it the vegan because we wanted that word to get out there. People used to say vegan. They didn't know what.
The vegan restaurant, and they had on every table there was information about veganism and the benefits of it and the reasons for it. The menus had quotes, philosophical quotes about not hurting other animals from famous people. And they would try to do things like if somebody came in and brought their family who wasn't familiar with vegan food, they would bring out a tasting sample of everything on the menu just to show people that this food can be delicious. You don't have to feel deprived. You don't have to feel like you're missing anything. Or and a lot of the dishes, they tried to make things that people would be familiar with anyway, like, you know, lasagna and veg rolls and
veg rolls, we call them. Yeah.
That's
We
funny.
love that business, by the way. We were all putting on a lot of weight.
Yeah, but that was inspiring. I mean, to see, and I love what you said about Casey Kasem, to see the celebrities. I mean, the awareness that you brought to them is powerful. And so who did shift also besides Casey Kasem after that?
Well, the Grateful Dead, that was a big one. Dr. Clapper, whom you might have heard of by now, very big in the movement.
Mm-hmm.
He's spending his time now teaching med students, especially the young ones. The old ones, he said, they sit like this, where the young people are interested, the young doctors, in treating people through their diet. They just leave that out of the teaching.
Dr. Clapper wrote some of the first books on vegan nutrition, and Gentle World published them. So that was in the 80s, also in the 80s. So there was Vegan Nutrition, Pure and Simple, and Pregnancy Children in the Vegan Diet. And so those were two of Gentle World's early, after the Yellow Cookbook, then came the two nutrition books. And so those were, two other big,
Sorry about that.
Ice cream truck, it sounded like.
A vegan ice cream truck.
So at one time they were working together, and he helped the Grateful Dead. Is that right? Because one of the Gentle World volunteers members was in the restaurant and saw the Grateful Dead eating the food. And maybe it was when you were doing the wholesale business.
Well, one of them was ill, maybe two of them were ill. And Dr. Clapper was with us, and he went to visit them. And after that, they would have their shows, and they would have them vegan. I don't know. I'm sure they don't do it anymore. But that was a major change, to have the Grateful Dead on our side, so to speak.
Well, they got sick again after not sticking with it,
Yeah,
right?
well,
So
that happened quite often. People would stop.
People get better, and then they go back to eating the
other way.
We
had people that come to visit us when the doctor was there. People had cancer. We had one woman that we had to carry in. She was in such bad shape. And when there was another guy there, they had cancer. When they left, they were playing volleyball with it. It went, because if you don't remove that desire, which is true with criminals too, if you don't remove the desire that made them that way in the first place, or drunk, alcoholics, if you don't remove what's causing them to be in the first place, they're gonna revert to what they did, which is what happened. And of course, they reverted and they didn't make it. But the cure was there, and it's not just the food; it was the love that we shared with them, and the kindness, and just the human things that can make anybody healthier.
The community, yes. I mean, the support that you all had and have still is tremendous, because vegan, even today, can be lonely. I know there's so many people that tell me, I feel alone, I'm sad, nobody understands me. So that's why it's great to have you all here, and knowing that when we come together, we can really make a shift, that it's crucial that we support each other, and to think about you all starting, I mean, that tiny little seed that's grown so much, Gentle World, and how it's touched so many lives. I mean, it's still rippling out is amazing.
The truth is, and it's a happy truth, except people don't live it, the whole world's a commune. The whole world's a community. I wish they would know that. It's like, I think dogs could teach us better. Of course, dogs could teach us better in a lot of areas. I love them. I think we got two that we rescued a half hour from being what they call euthanized, but that's a misnomer. Euthanization, as far as I know, calls for the acceptance of those who are being euthanized. And I don't think that's true with dogs giving permission, if they're perfectly healthy, to be murdered is what it is. You call it any word you want. If they don't give permission, it becomes murder, which is very sad. I can't even visit a pound. It would just, I wouldn't even be able to handle it. I look at puppies, I don't want to adopt them all. I wish I could. If I had the money that these rich people have, these billionaires, I would free every animal in what they call the humane society. Another misnomer. There's a few of them around where they call something and they give it a nice colorization, but it's not the truth. It's not a humane society when they kill animals. Anyway.
Yeah, as far as just going back to your point about, providing that sense of community, it's something that we have tried to do. Right now it's on pause because of COVID, but we've had for quite a while a visitor program where people can actually come and either, if they're not vegan, learn about being vegan. And we have had a really good success rate with people leaving here vegan when they didn't arrive that way. But also for some people who are vegan, and as you say, just feel, we've had people who will tell us they don't know a single other vegan. And then they come here and they're surrounded by vegans. And I think it kind of helps to just give, kind of a bit of an antidote to that feeling of loneliness that you're describing. And even the people who come here and learn how to be vegan, we always try to let people know, keep in touch with us, and if you're feeling isolated, or if you're feeling like you're losing your grip on your veganism, give us a call. Let us help you, recharge you, because it can be a little bit of an uphill battle for people, I think, just if they don't have other vegans around them, because you have to feel like you're constantly going against the grain. And I think that's a big part of why a lot of people actually lose their veganism. And even people who say that they started to not feel healthy or whatever, so they went back to eating animal products. I think sometimes it might just be that they're just worn down from having to be kind of go against the tide of what's constantly flowing at them all the time. This constant social conditioning that they're the ones who are wrong or weird or whatever. I think that can actually end up having maybe even a physical effect on one's health. But it's like one of your viewers just wrote, even if somebody told me meat was good for you, I still wouldn't eat it. I think one of the things is when you really, really become vegan, when veganism becomes an inner epiphany that becomes who you are, not just something that you do, but who you are, that becomes a priority. So if your lifestyle is not supportive of that, if your social scene is not supportive of that, if the place you live is not supportive of that, if you're able to, not everybody is, but if you're able to, dog is coming over, try and find a way of adjusting your life so that it is more supportive of that. Like, we'll have people come to us and say, well, I'd love to be vegan, but I travel, so I just can't, which is just bizarre. And we try to give people resources that show them how you can do that, even if you're traveling. If it's important enough to you, you can do it anywhere. But if you're traveling to a country that really is not supportive of veganism, maybe don't make that trip. If your job is really not supportive of your veganism, maybe find a way to change your life. And I know I'm not saying this like this is easy to do, because big life changes do take a lot of, can take a real push sometimes to make something like that happen. But it's about priorities, right? And once veganism really becomes like, okay, nothing can make me break this. This is as important to me as not killing human beings. This is as important to me as not being a racist. I'm not going to become a racist because I work with other racists. I wouldn't work in an environment that required me to be racist. So I'm not suggesting that everybody can just make any lifestyle change without this being take a tremendous amount of effort. But I am suggesting that people consider veganism to be a priority enough to make them, structure a life that embraces it rather than one that makes it more difficult. And now I have to let Freedom out. Sorry, she's at the door.
She wants.
That's all good. Yes. And that makes so much sense to really support yourself in what you need to do, and to get your get to really think about what's important in your life.
Right, exactly. And I mean, Light and Sun over the years have met people, and they've done a lot of traveling in different countries and have met people from all walks of life who have been able to comprehend the vegan message and do it regardless of their circumstances. I mean, I think of somebody like Bamboo, right, who was a peasant in Jamaica who literally lived in a shack with a dirt floor. And he became vegan and lived that way for the rest of his life. And in fact, helped other people to become vegan because he got it. So it didn't matter that he was literally dirt poor.
And he got it.
Wow.
He was an amazing man. Yeah. We called him Bamboo. Beautiful man.
That's touching.
So when people say, it's hard, you have to be wealthy, you have to have privilege and this and that. I mean, yeah, unfortunately, fruits and vegetables are too expensive. They are too expensive. And
not as expensive as doctor bills, though, which is an outcome of eating things that don't belong in our bodies. Obviously, if we were meant to eat meat, we would have a mouth that looked more like a tiger than the teeth and mouth we have. Plus, it would be very difficult to jump on the back of an antelope and bring.
But there's always a way to be vegan. People in the poorest countries in the world are kind of vegan by default just because the meat and dairy goes to richer people. So I think, again, it's a matter of what is really important to you. And, is veganism. And in fact, your viewer, again, who said, even if somebody convinced me meat was healthy, I still wouldn't eat it. We kind of take it as far as, even if they told us that you can't be healthy without it, even if they told us that you cannot be healthy on a vegan diet, we would have to do it anyway, because you just cannot, our conscience cannot reconcile with what it takes in order to do that, to eat those foods. But thankfully, the beauty of it is that it's not that way at all. When you do follow your conscience and when you do remove those animal-based food sources, what almost everybody finds that we hear about, if they really do it, if they really understand it and embrace it on an inner level, your body reacts like it's a huge relief to get rid of that other stuff.
My wife's son wrote a poem actually called "Let Conscience Be Your God," which is that is the God part of us. It's our conscience that always knows right from wrong.
And that affects our bodies. That's the thing. A lot of people, you hear these stories of people saying, I tried being vegan, but I got unhealthy. And I think, there are different theories on that to do with the fact that, maybe some people need to go about it in a different way. Maybe some people's bodies have different things, so they might have a different reaction. But our bodies also very much respond to the state of our minds. So when people really get veganism as an inner epiphany that they're joyful about, that they feel an inner peace about, that's going to also ripple into our body's response to it. Whereas if people try it, but they're really kind of resisting it and they really haven't fully come to the inner realization that it takes in order to actually become it, then if they've always got this kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, the body is going to respond to that too.
That's very true. And I hear that a lot also. I hear what you're saying. People saying that, well, it wasn't right for me. I can think of someone right now that told me that. So, yeah. And you're right. Eating differently. And I know that I've heard that with beans, sometimes you've got to go slow because, because if you're not used to eating a lot of beans, it could be a little bit.
Dr. Crutcher says that there can be a transitional period for some people where they need to break in new foods slowly and give their bodies time to adjust and this and that. But again, it's all about, what is your intention? If you really, really understand veganism, then that becomes the most important thing to you, is to get the rest of that stuff out of your life because you just don't want it. You don't want it. You don't want to have anything to do with these items that come from such horrendous cruelty and suffering. The reality is, if people don't want to be vegan or don't care about being vegan, then they can't really know what's going on. they can't really know what's going on. Or if they really know what's going on, they still don't want to be vegan. What they're really saying is, I don't care. I don't care that these innocent beings are suffering for my tastes and my pleasure. And frankly, if somebody feels that way, I don't know what you can do to make them care. You know, they just might be people who are impossible to reach. I don't know. But if they're telling you that it's for my health or this or that, it's probably not really true. It's probably more that they don't actually care. Because if somebody did care and their health for some reason really needed some meat or some dairy or some eggs or whatever, if that were true, if that's a circumstance in which somebody really wants to be vegan, but their body just can't do it, okay, well then how about eliminate all the leather from your life, eliminate all the wool from your life, eliminate all the silk, and eliminate absolutely everything from your diet that you don't need for your health. Eliminate all the junk food, eliminate everything non-vegan that you eat for pleasure, and limit it to just what you absolutely need for your health. That's not what I hear from these people. They just say, you know, I need it for my health, and so they keep eating whatever they want to eat. But it's a test of people's sincerity, you know, to say, okay, well then do that. Limit it to just the absolute bare minimum. And my guess would be, if you did that for enough of a period of time, your body would adjust and allow you to wean yourself off it. And before you know it, if you really want to be vegan enough, you will be.
Our dog just reminded me, and I wanted to mention, our dogs have been vegan too. We've had many of them over the years. They've been vegan and lived healthy, long lives. Too short always. Dogs' lives are too short. But some little kid once said, the reason their lives are so short is that we can love many of them. If we had one our whole lives, we would have one dog, which I thought was as good an explanation as any, because that's the saddest part of a dog, is they don't live as long as you'd like them to. But they've all been vegan, and nowadays, back in the old days, there were no vegan dog foods. We made whatever we made for the dog. And nowadays, we purchase, you know, they have vegan kibble. We feed them, what is that, V-Dog?
V-Dog. Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole bunch of them now. This is another hopeful sign that there wasn't a vegan dog food when I started, believe me. There wasn't even a thought of a vegan dog food. But I used to dream about those milk bones that were shaped like a bone. And nowadays they have them as vegan, those milk bones, they were called.
They used to dream about a time when vegan was stamped on the label of foods. You know, that used to be something that they would imagine that the future might contain, that when you go shopping, you don't have to read all the ingredients. You can look for the vegan symbol. And now, of course, that's all over the place.
That reminds me, we used to do, I think we had a lot of people. We'd go into a supermarket, we printed up stickers that said, the Medical Association has determined that this food is dangerous to your health. And we'd stick it on the meat in the counter in the supermarkets. And we also started, I don't know, people have done that since, but as far as I know, we were the first to hire an airplane with a banner behind it, you know, and advertising. And during spring break, we lived in Florida. During spring break, we would fly this banner. One of them said, during Thanksgiving thing, when the college kids were there, Thanksgiving is murder on turkeys. And during spring break, we had one that said, give the animals a break, stop eating them. And I don't, you know, you never know who it's influenced because you never see the people again, but it would be one of the things I'd like to find out, who changed out of all those thousands of kids that were there. My wife and I would go around with a microphone interviewing them like we were reporters from the radio as to what they thought about looking up in the sky and seeing that. Anyway, those were fun things to do.
You know, another thing, you know, back to your theme about empowerment and hope. And, you know, I think one of the things about being a part of the vegan movement is that it gives us a sense of purpose, which is so important. I mean, it's one of the one of the out and out ingredients that we need to live a happy life. I mean, when they've done studies on how happy people are, that's one of the big things, is having a sense of purpose.
Bigger than yourself.
Yeah, something bigger than yourself to be a part of. And I think just being vegan, being a part of veganism, gives us that in and of itself, because we become a part of something that is a vision for the future, you know, a movement for a more frankly, for a viable future, a future that's livable. You know, if we look around at the direction in which things are going, it can be very disheartening. But when we have a hope for something that would make it, that would change so many of these tremendous issues that have become existential, you know, sources of existential anxiety, whether we can continue existing on the planet, to be a part of something that actually offers a solution to so many of those, is in and of itself gives us a sense of purpose and gives us a sense that we're a part of something healthier and more wholesome and an important future of all of life on this planet.
To the future, period.
The future
to
itself.
having a future.
To having a future.
Definitely.
We have a little freeze.
Yes, I see that. Well, I'm looking at these great comments while I think y'all are here. So I see you. And so that's my friend Aaron's band, Vox Vegana, and they have a song, The Future is Vegan, and I love that song.
Okay,
so
they have a song.
Really?
When did that song come out? Because this T-shirt was given to Light by Keegan Kuhn from Cowspiracy. So he came to visit us here in Hawaii years before he did Cowspiracy, and his friend had been screen printing these shirts, and he gave one to Light as a gift. And we just love the slogan so much because it's so positive and it's so hopeful and inspiring and optimistic. So I'm just wondering if your friend knew about this slogan already, or did they themselves?
Well, Aaron is watching. Aaron will have to send you his song, The Future is Vegan, Vox Vegana. So I don't know when it must have come out in the past few years. I think when COVID hit is when he formed Vox Vegana, which is, it's beautiful. He's out there he's out there performing with his vegan his vegan hat and shirts, and, you know, inspiring in different ways. And I love what everybody inspires in their own way. And I see that that Angela's here, and she's inspiring by working out and showing people that you can thrive in your older age. I don't want to say old age, but of course we all get older, right? And you can thrive. And she's helping everybody, no matter what state you're in, you know, no matter what physical state you're in, you still can move and exercise. And she's an inspiration. So thank you, Angela, for watching. And Plant-Based Louie is here. And Plant-Based Louie is saying that it's not a diet. You're right. It's more than a diet, right? It's more than a diet. So it's beautiful. And here's another wonderful comment. Veganism is a joy. You're right, Susan. And I think what you're saying, Angel, is about the connectiveness of everyone. You know, when you connect with every living being on the planet, that's what veganism is. We're not putting ourselves over anyone else. We're stepping into something greater. And that something greater, again, relates to the whole purpose of veganism. So I think tying everything together is beautiful.
Yeah, it's that sense of kinship, you know, in a way, when we say they're animals, we're humans, they're animals. That's a separation that's not real. We're animals too. We're all part of the animal kingdom. And if we're going to say that we're deserving of certain rights and protections because we have feelings, but they're not, that's just denying the reality of our connection with them. We know how they feel because we're made of the same stuff. you know, they're not like rocks and trees any more than we're like rocks and trees. I mean, in a sense, of course, an extension of that veganism is feeling a kinship with the entire planet and everything on it. But the animal connection, which veganism, I think, just kind of breaks down that separation and says, okay, we're not separated from the animal kingdom. We may be a different species of animal, but we are a part of that animal kingdom. So we're able to empathize with them because we understand we're made of flesh and blood, they're made of flesh and blood. We have brains, they have brains. We have central nervous systems, they have central nervous systems. If we carry, go along according to this belief that somehow we're so dramatically different from them, that we can do these things to them that would cause us absolute extreme pain and suffering and heartbreak and fear and terror. And that's okay because they don't feel it. I mean, that's when we do these things that are not vegan, when we make these non-vegan choices, that's kind of what we're pretending, is that they don't feel. Because if we accept that they do, then that's not okay. You know, the only reason we can accept it as being somehow not horribly unethical to do that is if we pretend to ourselves and to each other that they don't really feel it. And that's just complete denial of reality. So when we break down that wall and say, okay, I feel, they feel, we're actually become more whole in ourselves because we're coming to a better understanding of the nature of animal beings, which is who we are. So that's why, you know, more and more we try to lean in this direction of not calling them animals, actually, because that suggests the separation between us and them. So even though it's a bit more, you know, it's a little bit more wordy to call them non-human animals or other animals, I think it's kind of an important point to say, to kind of make it clear through our language that that is something we share in common. These animals are other animals like us. And I think that hopefully will help to shift people's consciousness into recognizing that they feel like we do. They suffer like we do. They feel like we do. You know, that's such an important part of acting with empathy.
It seems obvious to all of us that they feel like we do. They scream in pain and they cry and they don't want to go in that slaughterhouse. It seems quite obvious. But the truth is obvious. It's just difficult for people to accept the obvious, I'm afraid.
Well, and we were talking about this the other day, too, with that same couple who were here to visit, because she's kind of at this point where it's like she's on the threshold of becoming vegan, it seemed like, from the conversation. So it was an exciting conversation to have, because when somebody's at that point and they're kind of asking you to help push them over the edge, it's a beautiful opportunity and a wonderful thing to be a part of, just helping to remind somebody of everything that's already inside them that is encouraging that move, that shift. So we got to have that experience with this woman. And where was I? Something about, what did you just say?
You're looking to me to remind you.
No, it's important. Oh, yeah, because, you know, this resistance that people have, sometimes we kind of point to, yeah, it's that they like the way it tastes. It's that they, you know, maybe some people really still think they need it for their health. I don't know if that still holds on, probably for some people. There's the social side of it where people feel like they're going to have to give up eating with their friends or going to certain restaurants and all of that. There's the convenience factor. You know, people don't want to have to, you know, make their own food when they go places or whatever. But I actually think that one of the biggest things that holds people back is this fear of having to experience the remorse that we go through when we have that epiphany. Because once you awaken to it and you don't want to be a part of it anymore, something that goes along with that is, she's describing it as like, you know, regret and sorrow for, she explained about when she became vegetarian. You know, she went from being a meat eater to vegetarian, and she had to go through this process of just kind of recognizing the pain she had been a part of, and that can be really hard, especially for sensitive people. But it is, of course, it's a step a way, right? It's like you kind of have to go in order to really internalize it and internalize the commitment to moving forward in a new way. And I think that holds a lot of people back. I think they're afraid of that, and they're think they can't handle it, because there's guilt in there, there's shame in there. And so for a lot of people, they just shut the door. They don't want to feel that, right? You don't want to think of yourself in that way as somebody who participated in horrendous acts of cruelty, maybe when we even knew better. I mean, I know for me, I became vegetarian too young to be able to sustain it. Like I was 12 years old and I heard about meat and I said, oh, I want to be vegetarian. And I couldn't keep it going. And then at 16, I came back to it. But then when I kind of started to become vegan, I didn't really become vegan. I learned about it, but I didn't really embrace it. I didn't commit to it. So by the time I actually became vegan, when I met Light and Sun really and heard these stories, and I had this period of my life which I had to kind of reconcile myself with, where I knew the truth and I hadn't actually acted on it. And because I was embarrassed about that and I was kind of ashamed and guilty about that, I held it off even longer. I was like, oh, I already am. I know I'm vegan enough. And then finally, I actually was at a Gentle World seminar, the first time I was volunteering with Gentle World, and Sun gave a talk about veganism from her point of view, the spirituality of compassion, she called it. And she had this very powerful line about how, I can't stop the animal industry. I can't stop them from doing what they're doing. All this pain and suffering, I don't have any power to stop that. And that's kind of heartbreaking, actually. But what I can do is I can stop me from participating in it. That's power I do have. And it just struck me right in my core. And all of a sudden it was like, oh yeah, this is actually my duty now as a person of conscience. Now that I do know, I have to cut all ties with this industry, because it is an obscene, horrendous industry that I don't want to have any part of. I want to shed that from myself and be free from it, be free from the guilt and the shame. And of course, once I did, what a freedom. I didn't have to justify this or that or half this and half that and make excuses. It was just like, oh, what a relief to let that go. The peace that came in as a result was well worth anything that I had to stop doing. Even just letting go of my own, just having to humble myself, I guess, having to humble myself to this realization that I wasn't already that. I had to become that. I kind of saw it as like, was I lesser than when I didn't? Or, it was hard. It was a hard kind of ego battle, I guess you could say. But the other side of that is this tremendous freedom. And so I think, going back to my conversation with this woman the other day, she was agreeing, and it was beautiful. She was so open to what we were talking about. But we were just sharing about this idea that maybe for some people, the sticking point is really about having to see yourself, your past self, your non-vegan self, with real honesty, for what maybe those acts were when we participated in them. And that can be hard to go through. But the thing about making that shift is that at the same token, it allows you to let go of all that. It allows you to say goodbye to all that, because as we step into our vegan self, we can actually relieve ourselves of all that past, everything you're guilty of, that you maybe were guilty of. It's not you anymore. You're not that person anymore. So you can step forward and say, that's the past. And I'm sorry for everything I did that I maybe should have known better, but I'm not that person anymore. So goodbye. Lesson learned.
We used to say to realize, to see things with real eyes, was a turning point in our lives, which still holds true.
Yeah, it's not our fault. Even though we may have, even with me, I knew better and I did it anyway. Well, the reason is because my whole life, for all of us, we've all been conditioned by a society that tells us that it's perfectly okay to do that. So, yeah, maybe we should know better and this and that. But on the other hand, we have to be a little bit easy on ourselves in the sense of it's just the reality of the world that we were all born into, is that it's telling you constantly, all the time, through every advertisement, every billboard, every conversation you have with somebody who reflects the narrative, the species' narrative. It's constantly telling us that it's perfectly fine to keep doing that. Absolutely fine, totally normal, nothing wrong with it. Everybody's doing it. In fact, you're weird if you don't do it. So let's not get too bogged down in the guilt and the shame for our pre-vegan days. The most important thing, and this is the other thing that vegans say over and over and over again, and I'm sure you've heard it, and I'm sure everybody listening has been through it themselves. I wish I did it sooner. What took me so long? Why did I hold out? Why, and I often feel like if we could just put a headset on people, a virtual reality headset that would let them feel the way they're going to feel when they're vegan,
Right.
There's no question they would gladly give up the milk and the cheese and the ice cream and the cookies and the cakes and whatever it is that they think they can't give up. It's nothing compared to the joy that we receive, the sense of peace, the peace of having a calm conscience, a quiet conscience. That in and of itself is a better, a benefit to veganism that far outweighs anything that you have to give up.
Well, so nowadays you don't even have to give up ice cream.
No, that's right. All that stuff is there anyway.
We can have it.
They had to give it up. That was really, that was part of the empowering part of their stories. When they stopped eating ice cream, they thought they would never have ice cream again. It took them years to even learn that you can make frozen banana ice cream through the Champion juicer. But they certainly didn't think that they would have Soy Delicious and, cashew and almond and all the different beautiful vegan ice creams that we have now. So it just goes to show you, when you feel like you're a part of something bigger, when you feel like you're doing something right, that's the nourishment. That's the nourishment.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. And then that goes back to Gentle World. I mean, you're doing something, a big thing going here that's, again, radiating everywhere. So I'm just looking at these comments, and it looks like Aaron in Vox Vegana wrote, "The future is vegan in 2020." And I guess we're going to need to wrap this up. I'm sad, but I guess you all probably have a fun plan for Hawaii. And so, yeah, I'm seeing some beautiful comments here. And
so your friend Aaron formed Vox Vegana in 2020 as a response to COVID. Was it kind of like, okay, the world is darkening, I need to do something, of the light, something positive to bring some goodness to the world and to create a vegan outreach initiative? I love that.
Yes, COVID caused him to, they put together Vox Vegana, but not in the same country, right? Because they had to put it together in different, like one of the singer is in, Diksha is in India. So they put together Vox Vegana because Aaron was going to choir and it wasn't vegan. So he said, listen, I want to be around vegans. So that's beautiful. And he's sharing his vegan music and he's actually working on a musical. It's called, now I can't think of the name of it. What's the name of it, Aaron? But it's going to be a musical about Keith Frankenberger, a little boy who's going to, it's called Camp Compassion. So this little boy's going to a camp and he doesn't know that it's a vegan camp. So it's about his discovery process. So that's exciting. I'm waiting for Aaron to finish that. He's working on that. So to get out this word and it's it's going to be a lighthearted production, not anything heavy, but yeah, so it's wonderful to see people spreading veganism in different ways through the arts, through painting and through just different elements and so I'm doing it through coaching, right? I'm coaching vegans to become empowered so they can use their voices. So I'm not I do go out on the streets, but my work is one-on-one coaching to get people up and out, not so sad where they can't take action. And you all are doing it in Hawaii, and we're all spread out and making an impact. So that's the main thing, is when we get up to realize, you all, that Light's been doing this for, my gosh, he's had such a tremendous impact, and you, Angel, as well. And then we've got others everywhere planting seeds, and all those seeds are going to sprout. And like you said, Angel, we don't know when there's going to be a big shift. And because everyone's planting all these different seeds, it could be any time.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. There's a great film. If anybody is feeling that way, kind of hopeless about the state of the movement or the future of the reality for animals. The movie's not about animals, but it's about the end of the transatlantic slave trade between England and the United States. It's called Amazing Grace. And when I saw it, it just gave me such optimism for our movement, because the way the very, very if you but in the movie, loophole in the law. I'm not sure if I was being heard there, because I lost you.
No.
Okay.
Well, I lost you.
Okay. Well, the film Amazing Grace, it just shows this timeline of the change in the law that made it illegal to ship slaves from England to the United States, which I guess was a big part of bringing slaves over from Africa. They came to England and then to America. So the movie shows that the activists at the time, who were, politicians, really, really hard to change the law. And it was like this terrible, uphill, exhausting struggle. And something happened that was just like this strange loophole in the law that they didn't even see coming. They signed one law into effect, and it just had this knock-on effect that made it impossible for them to do the shipping with the boats. And it effectively brought an end to this trade that it just happened so quickly. And so I encourage anybody who's feeling discouraged to watch that movie, because it gives you an example of how things could change in our movement. It could be something that is at the time that we least expect it, in the way that we least expect it. Something could shift so that this has to come to an end.
Well, there's hope. You all have given me so much hope, and listening to these stories and everyone on their journey has really inspired me. So I'm so thankful to hear this, and I'm thankful for everybody watching.
The most hopeful thing I see on this planet.
No, it was just a glitch in the Zoom. Go ahead.
I said it's the most hopeful thing I see on this planet is veganism. It's the only thing that I see going forward, whereas the wars and the missiles and that's all going backward. The only thing I see going forward is veganism. So those who are listening that are discouraged, if they were 50-year vegans, they wouldn't be discouraged. They would see a great, great, great change in the positive. Veganism is almost a popular word now, where it was totally unknown.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, so we can hold our heads high and be proud to be vegans. That's wonderful. Yes. So, well, where can people find Gentle World?
Well, our website is gentleworld.org. And if you go there, you can sign up for our newsletter. And we're also on Facebook as gentleworld.org, I believe. And then we have Instagram, and we have a YouTube channel. So we can be found in all those places. And you can, the easiest way is just to go to our website, and then you'll find us everywhere.
Wonderful. So everybody, please go to Gentle World, one of those places, and make a donation and support and reach out to these beautiful rays of light. Thank you so much, Light and Angel, for this divine time. I'm very honored.
Thank you, Mariquita. It's been very, very enjoyable.
Thank you. Yes.
And thank
everybody.
You to
all your listeners for joining us.
And thank you for what you do. It's every bit helps. It's all, excuse the expression, nails in the coffin of this horrificness.
You're right. Every bit helps. So thanks everybody watching. Thank you all, because everyone here is, a savior for animals. All right. Namaste vegan, everyone.
Sorry, we just had another glitch, so we missed your conclusion. But I think it was every little bit helps, and certainly we'll drink to that. Thank you, Marikita. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.